This is the Visible Voices podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. I'm here with Jackie Cummings-Koski, aka Jackie, and Dr. Bill Yount, Bill, from the Catching Up to Five podcast. FI means financial independence. Jackie and Bill just celebrated their 1 millionth podcast download. Catching Up to FI is the Mindset, Money, and Life podcast specifically for late starters of any age on the journey to financial independence. Jackie reached financial independence in her 40s after navigating poverty, divorce, and single motherhood. Bill is a 58-year-old emergency medicine physician who woke up to FI at 50 after living paycheck to paycheck. Together, they represent what they call the silent majority, people who didn't start their financial journey in their 20s, but are determined to catch up. The cognitive dissonance between knowing you need financial security and believing it's possible versus impossible creates toxic stress that impacts everything from your sleep to your immune system. But here's what the financial industry doesn't want you to know. Starting your wealth building journey at 40, 50, or even 60 might actually give you surprising advantages. Jackie and Bill, welcome to the Visible Voices podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Oh my gosh.
Love that introduction.
The silent majority, the largely ignored group. You have over 150 episodes, 1 million downloads of the podcast. Say more about exactly the audience to whom you're speaking and this impetus of the silent majority.
There's just no voice or community for the people that are late starters out there. And, I had been a DJ when I was in high school. And so I reinvented myself back into I went back to the past and said, and my son encouraged me because I was like, I really don't have a voice. This is intimidating, getting a podcast up and start. I can't believe that it would actually go anywhere. And I started with Becky Heptig, who is a retired grandma. She was generous in giving us her time to address so many issues that she had, and starting at 50 with a zero net worth and retiring at 63 with $1.3 million. And it's an amazing story. And we wanted to get those stories out there to tell people you're not alone. You've got to overcome the shame, remorse, regret, and anger that you feel at yourself, which can be very destructive. And, embrace where you're at and start afresh. I went from being a spender to a saver, and that's a very hard journey.
Jackie, the silent majority, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Resa, I thought it was a very good point when you were mentioning that your age may be more of a secret weapon than something that holds you back on this fight journey, because there's a lot of people in this space, and Bill was the one that actually did something about it. I knew for the longest that this financial independence, retire early community mainly were highlighting 30-year-olds that had it all figured out right after college. Well, we knew in our hearts, and from people that we have talked to, many, many people, that that's not the norm. Those are the anomalies that the media loves to spotlight. And so there's more people that didn't understand their finances when they were young, only started understanding them when they made mistakes. And then they wake up at 30, 40, 50 and realize, oh my gosh, I didn't know all of this stuff and I'm getting a late start. And we filled a huge gap because no one was talking to that demographic, and we hear it every day.
I'd love each of you to commit to one word, just one word, that describes the stories that you hear in this silent majority community. I've heard shame. I've heard fear. Anything else? One word. Bill, one word, Jackie.
I would say shock. Everybody has some kind of wealth shock, health shock, divorce shock. There's always some impetus. For me, it was turning 50, and I realized nobody's going to take care of me other than me. So shock is my word.
And I think my word would be regret. People, when they wake up, they're thinking about the things they did wrong, what they should have done differently. And so that's probably the one word that really sticks in my mind.
How would you say that trauma loss is a way to represent what got you to FI? Jackie, why don't you take it first, then Bill?
Yeah, I think my biggest wake up call was at the time of my divorce. Now, I had plenty of things before then. I grew up in poverty. My dad died when I was 18 before I graduated from high school. But at the time of my divorce, I finally started paying attention to the finances, or I was made to, because when I looked at the retirement accounts, because during the divorce, they were to be split up, and realized that I only had $20,000 in my retirement account. And I was in my mid 30s. So honestly, I don't know if that was bad or good. But my husband had $120,000. So that was the shock that Bill mentioned. That was regret that I was talking about. And I processed all that, and I promised myself that I never wanted to feel that financially ignorant again. And I use very blunt words like that because that's what it was. And that was the big turning point.
The trauma was that money was dealt with as a trauma in my family. It scared me away from money. For a very long time, my dad got audited a couple times on his taxes. I was like, oh, taxes. I can understand that. It causes trouble. It caused him a lot of stress. They didn't talk about money. And so I would look at that as trauma. They got divorced partly over money. And then the trauma, too, for me was my life was a delayed gratification life as a physician. I didn't have any kind of big income until my early 30s. And so there was a lot of catching up to spending that I had to do. And I got caught in that spend first, save last mentality because, there was the big cars, the big houses, there was the doctor life. I created my own trauma at that point because of ignorance. I didn't know what a net worth statement was. I didn't know to track my expenses. It was just, let's enjoy life in the moment, but let's, not meet our future self. So the trauma for me was I didn't reverse engineer my life and realize this is where I want to go. This is my destination. And what is the path? What is the plan to get there? I had no plan.
I wrote this book called Microskills, and the premise is that every overwhelming task, project, everything that we're sort of delaying because we just can't deal with it, we can break things down into small, intentional actions and behaviors. So right now, what would be one thing that you remember that you did, each of you, to start turning around this fear, this shame, this regret, this trauma?
When I realized, at the time of my divorce that I didn't know anything about finances, there was a shared parent agreement. So every other weekend, my daughter's dad had her. So I had to ask myself that really tough question, like, what do I want to do now that I actually enjoy? And oddly enough, I was interested in the stock market. So I was talking to a friend on the phone, a work friend. She lived in Boston. I lived in Ohio. And we were talking about stocks. I had no idea what I was doing, right? But she liked stocks as well. And we would chat. And she finally said, there's a nonprofit organization called Better Investing. And they have clubs around the country, investment clubs. I'm sure they have one near you. And she said, you should Google it. So I Googled it. And there was one close to where I lived. I started going to those meetings, and it did more than just teach me about the stock market. Finally, I was around people that were way smarter than me about stocks and the market and investing. And I didn't have to talk about my divorce all the time because at that time, right after it was done, it seems like every single conversation began and ended with that. So that was my retreat, to focus on something that I knew would be positive and would feed a curiosity that I had and that would make me better. And that opened up my whole world. That was the beginning for me.
Bill, just one thing. What was just one thing?
City, I would agree with that. And I took back my money. I had given it away to salesmen and a private bank that were charging me, and I didn't pay attention to what I was paying. So it was sort of a take back control of your life and then getting curious about my education. I had been educated on medicine, but I had, and medical health, but I didn't know what financial health was. I didn't know what creating wealth was. I could look rich, but I wasn't wealthy.
Audience members may or may not be surprised that they don't really actually teach us about managing money. Physicians, that's a deficit in our education, but it doesn't start in just medicine and medical school and becoming a doctor. Jackie, you and I share this interest about public school education. It should start way back. It should be everybody in universal public education. And both of you are committed to educating the community. But Jackie, you've actually gotten the degrees, the certifications to be an educator. I looked it up right before we jumped on the show. Right now, 28 states are in the process of requiring public high school to offer a personal finance course. 10 states have fully implemented the process, 18 are in progress, and Colorado is the most recent state. Jackie, can you share more with the audience about your education commitment?
Yes, well, it gives me goosebumps to hear that many states, because a year ago it wasn't even half, and now we're up to 28. And that was my early glimpse into what a difference learning about money made on your economic life. Like, I was on the free lunch program, uh, struggled as a kid, and to know that learning about money moved me from being in poverty and all of those challenges into the middle class to where I was actually able to retire early. Like, to me, that is huge, but I know I'm not the only one. There's so many smart people that are not exposed to education about their money, or maybe they have bad habits that they have watched at home and they don't know what they don't know. So when you sort of equalize it or attempt to equalize it and put it in public schools so that every student that is attending public school is getting some type of financial education. Now, is it the end all be all? No. But to have this requirement, to me, is a huge way to lift up, all Americans to get this information and to be able to start it when they're young. I'm in Ohio. Thank goodness Ohio requires it. That passed a few years ago. Bills in Tennessee. Tennessee requires it. It should be all 50 states. But as much as I can, I go to high schools and I talk about personal finance. I'm giving away $2 bills. I'm singing, I'm dancing, whatever it takes to get their attention to learn just a little something about money. So I have that huge commitment, and Bill's along for the ride too.
I mean, there's not many lessons you need to learn. It's really simple. The financial services industry makes it so complicated, it puts you off. There's an alphabet soup of choices, and it becomes overwhelming. So what do? You shut down, put your head in the sand like I did, and do nothing. You got to learn needs versus wants. You've got to learn to save first, spend last. You've got to learn to max out your retirement accounts, or get to the point where you're maxing out your retirement accounts. I mean, honestly, that's about it. If somebody took you aside and told you these three things, you would be independent in 20 years.
I really love that. I want to circle back to Bill. You're just one thing. You're talking about calling up the people that were taking money from you that didn't need to. That reminded me of the ability that we have to renegotiate things like our cable or some of our utilities. I recently called up my mobile phone carrier because the monthly went up. And I called them and I said, "Hi, why the monthly? What happened?" And I said, "Are there any plans?" I called them and they're like, "Well, are you a veteran?" I said, "No." They're like, "Are you over 55?" I said, "Actually, yeah, I'm over 55. It's the first time I've seen something over 55 benefit me." And they're like, "Oh." Next thing I knew, my monthly charge dropped $15 a month. And I was like, win-win. What's one thing they can do today to check to make sure they're cutting down on some of the unnecessary spending?
Track your expenses. You got to know how much you're spending, and there's a lot of apps for that. I use Monarch Money, but there's a lot of apps for that. And if you watch where your money's going, you'll be amazed at all the things that you're paying that you're probably not using or underutilizing, as you said. And if you plug the holes in the bucket or the holes in the boat, you'll be amazed that you'll be hundreds of dollars a month that you could invest, as opposed to, as I say, let the money slip through your fingers and slip through the sieve of your life if you're not paying attention. And, just waking up and paying attention to where your money's going and realizing that, I'm buying lunch every day for $25 when I could pack my lunch and take it to work. I can renegotiate all my monthly expenses. I just recently, to resonate with you, renegotiated my cell phone bill because they had a healthcare professional discount that I didn't know about. And it was a significant discount, just like you got over 55. And I had to change my service and I don't have cable, but for internet, because I had one company that jumped up and doubled it, and I ended up having it from where I was before because I was just like, it made me mad. And I only knew about that because I was watching.
Yeah, Bill has a really good point about the things that are automated. It's great when it comes to investing and us trying to save automation. But when we have subscriptions that we just automatically pay and we never pay attention to the price, that's a good place to start. For instance, most of us have our mortgage payments through escrow, and we never think about the cost of insurance. because it's automatically taken out. That's worth reviewing. So things like that. But I will mention one of the big three that I found to be the most valuable. The big three is housing, transportation, and food. Let's take transportation. Now, a lot of people in the FI movement, they pride themselves with driving high mileage cars, older high mileage cars. I don't. Okay. So you don't need to subscribe to every little thing. I like to drive a luxury car. Bill kills me with it all the time. Fine. But one thing that I have decided to do is it doesn't have to be all or none. So there's always a compromise. So I don't want to pay $80,000 for a brand new Lexus. However, my rule of thumb is that I do like the Lexus brand. They last longer. I keep my car for a long time, usually 8 to 10 years, but also I don't buy it brand new. I usually get it. My sweet spot is 3 to 5 years old, where I can get it for about 50% of what it would cost brand new. And I keep it 8 to 10 years. Okay, so I have cut my costs quite a bit, but I'm still driving a luxury car that I actually enjoy. So there's always a compromise. It's not all or none. If you go just cutting and slashing everything and all the fun out of your life is gone, that's not going to stick. So I just find ways to make a compromise.
It's graduation season, and guess what? There's a perfect gift for anyone taking their next big step. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, co-authored by Dr. Resa E. Lewis. This book breaks down success into specific intentional behaviors that anyone can develop, whether you're a student entering the workforce or simply wanting to improve your daily interactions, and who wouldn't want to do that? These evidence-based techniques will transform how you communicate and present yourself. What makes this book so special is that it doesn't offer generic advice. It provides actionable resources that make a real difference in all aspects of your life. Available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook formats wherever you get your books. And if you're looking to bring microskills to your organization or student group, reach out to Dr. Lewis directly via LinkedIn or through her website. Remember, Microskills, your go-to graduation gift that keeps on giving throughout life's journey.
This is a time that I'm going to do a little bit of a plug of this book, Fire for Dummies. Jackie, you're the author of this. And my first question is, how are you different having written this book?
How am I different? Well, I had all that stuff in my head, and I think it takes a certain skill to be able to take what's in your head and actually put it on paper to where other people can understand it and make sense of it. So I'm not even the biggest reader out there, but I love to write and write for comprehension for other people to be able to understand it. And I believe that my lens, I am a divorced Black woman that grew up in poverty. I'm not the majority of the people in the FIRE movement. There's very few of my demographic, but I've been exposed to a lot. And I felt like that helped me to understand, hey, I can explain this piece better than anyone else. I can bring these things together in a way that no one else can. And I have that heart of a teacher. So the education with finances, it's an opportunity to provide education to so many people. And so it changed me just because it helped me realize how important it is to take my story and what I've learned and provide it as a shortcut for other people.
When you believe in what you've written and in what you're sharing on the mic, it's so easy to share, and it feels great that information can be well received and you're getting that feedback that, hey, you're making a difference. This helped me. I applied that today. I just did this yesterday. Speaking of something that I shared that I applied, I was reading in the book about beneficiaries and naming beneficiaries. And there was something that I wasn't aware of. And you talked about a legacy contact. I'm wondering if you can tell the audience a bit about the importance of and what is a legacy contact.
These days, a lot of our lives are digital, right? Between what we have on our cloud storage like Google to what's on our iPhone, what's on our websites, even your podcast library, right? So these days, most people do have an iPhone. Well, Apple has a way that you can set up a legacy contact. It's actually right on your phone. You go into settings and you can choose that person. So it makes it easier if something happens to that person that they have already designated you as their legacy contact. I don't know if Google has one. Honestly, these days, they all need to be doing it. Okay. But not everyone is, but that is something to think about, that there's no easy way to really do it now. You have to proactively do it. But since so much of our lives is in the virtual world, having a legacy contact will give the proper person access when you're gone.
Yeah, I love that idea because I certainly have a few people that I would definitely make my legacy contact versus just like leaving it to whoever randomly otherwise, someone who's making my health decisions is different than someone that I would have looking at my digital library.
That's right. That's right. It's often a different person. So yeah, I attempted to put in as much new information that I wasn't seeing out there. And so there are nuggets like that that I just didn't see anywhere else that I thought would be important for most people.
Bill, I'm wondering what you've seen in terms of changes in the community. What's been the delta with books, with the podcast, with you actually reaching this silent majority, this community, this lost generation? What's changed?
Awareness, vision, thinking about your own health. Financial capital is not the only form of capital. I mean, we talk about health span versus lifespan. You see a lot of people living longer, but are they living healthy? Are their finances good enough to carry them to 95 or 100? Is their physical health good enough so that they can enjoy being a grandparent? And I see these active 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds. I mean, read Peter Attia and his book about living well and living with your health span longer so that you can enjoy your life. And taking care of your financial health is a springboard to these other forms of capital in living a full and long life.
I think it's a great time for me to ask each of you about your voice. When did you realize you had a voice, and when did you start using your voice?
January of 2023, and I've been thinking about it a long time because I was in analysis paralysis. As a physician, I'm type A. Before I took over my money, I had to read a whole library of books for a year because I had to be educated. I took over these things and I felt good about it. It was like a game. I mean, when I want to give myself a gift, I give myself an index fund. It really helps you realize that life is about relationships, spending money on memories, the stuff, there's hedonic adaptation where you may get the new car, it may smell great, but in the end, it's a thing that takes you from one place to the other. It's a utility. You want to buy utility in a optimized fashion and rent luxury. We had a boat. Our boat was named YOLO. I mean, and that signified what our life was. We had a lot of good memories with our kids, but we overdid it. We built a house. We renovated a house to the nines. If we hadn't done that and we just bought just enough house, we get sold more house than we need, I'd be financially independent now.
Yeah. And I think I gained my voice. I was still working my corporate job, and my daughter was about 14 years old, and I had been learning all of this financial literacy stuff. And as a parent, when we learn something, the first thing we want to do is share it with our kids or teach it to our kids. So when I was in undergrad, my part of my program was journalism. I enjoyed writing, and I saw that it was fairly easy to write a book. You can do self-publishing and all that. And I'm like, I'd love to put all this stuff in a book. So I started when my daughter was 14 writing this book. It's a self-published book called Money Letters to My Daughter. And I'm like, how do I really get her to read it at this age? So I worked hard to make it fun and to increase the chances of her actually reading it. So every letter started with Dear Amber. I talked about issues or topics that were very simple and age appropriate. And I would always sign off with all these cute little naming schemes. Like when I talked about credit cards, I kind of called them crumb snatchers because they have all these fees and stuff. And I'm like, sincere love, mom, moms against crumb snatchers. I just tried to make it as fun as possible, which is kind of quirky now that I look back on it. But it gave me the voice. Once I got that book published, I wanted to give it to her for her graduation gift. So it was done when she was about 17. So it took me almost 3 years, way too long. But I was glad that I got it out into the atmosphere. My daughter helped me read it and write it without knowing it. So everybody's like, did she read the book? I'm like, well, while I was writing it, I would have her read each letter, tell me if it made sense. And right after that book was published, all of a sudden I had a lot of schools reaching out, wanting me to come in and talk about the book, do a little class. And that started the whole idea that, hey, maybe I can teach other people about this, not just my own daughter. So that was my voice.
Yeah. Well, the audience will not be surprised that you are both guests on the Visible Voices podcast. You are both certainly visible voices. If people want to follow you, read more, take up all this content, Jackie and Bill, what's the best place to keep in touch?
Well, of course, we're going to say the podcast, Catching Up to Phi. It's just catchinguptophi.com. We release new episodes every Sundays and sometimes on Wednesdays if we have something to talk about. And my direct email is Jackie at Catching Up to Phi. Bill's is Bill at Catching Up to Phi. And of course, my book, Fire for Dummies, is available everywhere books are sold. It's been out about a year. I'm very happy with how it's done. So is my publisher, but it does walk you from A to Z about reaching financial independence, retire early if you want to. I did retire early, so I can speak to that as well.
Well, we want folks to join our community. You can find it at Catching Up to Phi. We have a robust Facebook group where the dialogue occurs after the podcast. Questions get asked and answered. We have experts like Bill Bengen, who is the father of the 4% rule, if you've heard of it, in the group, who's active and will answer your questions. That's a great place to come out of your shell, take your head out of the sand, shed your shame, and realize that you're not alone. We love our audience. They're very engaged, very enthusiastic. It feeds our souls. It feeds our hearts. And we look forward to every week meeting a new guest that we can share with our audience.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Thanks, Resa. This was awesome.
The Visible Voices podcast amplifies voices in the healthcare equity and current trend spaces. Our team includes Dr. Giuliano DePortu and me, Dr. Resa E. Lewis. Find me at Resa E. Lewis, MD on social media, or visit the website, thevisiblevoicespodcast.com. Please give us a 5-star rating on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. Be sure to subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube, and share the show with a friend, because together we're making healthcare more equitable, one visible voice at a time. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their institutions. Information shared here should never substitute for clinical judgment or for medical advice.